one of the things we're going to do tonight, woohoo! They're trading recipes. That's what they're doing. One of the things we're going to do tonight is well, really our focus for tonight is the polity and an organization that is uniquely United Methodist. And one of the things you're going to want to remember as we go into this is that if we got a chance to share all of our stories, our church stories or our unchurched stories, we would find this vast diversity, right, of places and people and experiences and memorable moments, and just multiply that over and over and over again to imagine the diversity within our denomination, our international church. So we're going to learn tonight what makes us church, how we uniquely organize ourselves, how that's, how that's really based on our theology and our faith, and then by understanding our organization, as we get into our courageous conversations in the next few weeks, we'll have a much better kind of framework for our conversations around the future of the denomination. The papers that are on your table are just scrap paper. If you want to take any notes, sometimes we're picture people. We're going to be doing some drawing tonight. I will be, and you might want to replicate that. So I saw letterhead in our scrap paper pile. I was wondering, why is that? And then look at the pastor's names on the bottom. That's why. so that's how we do life in our church. And so we're going to use that paper again. I'll send this around, and if your name isn't already on here, go ahead and add it to the list. But if it is, if you check off your name, and then we'll go ahead and have attendance for tonight. But before we get started, I don't know about y'all, but we've had busy full days today. So I just invite you, wherever you are, to get in a space of just kind of resting and being fully present. We'll just take about 2 or 3 really deep, quiet breaths. And then I'll invite us to be just in a moment of prayer as we prepare ourselves to be fully present in this place. So let's just do some breathing for a minute. Remember that we are here, God is here, we are gathered in community. Oh, holy and loving one, so much has filled this day. So much has filled our minds, our hearts, the ways we've interacted with others, the ways we may be carrying right now, even from this day, words or experiences of regret or thanksgiving. We offer it to you, God. We offer it to you that you might take it, so that we can be fully present in this place, in this time right now, for our learning and growing in faith and grace with one another. Thank you for the histories that have shaped the people that we are, for the stories that have taught us the value of community, of being with and loving with and serving with. We pray a blessing upon our learning and our growing tonight. We ask all this in Christ's name. Amen. So tonight we're talking about how Methodists uniquely organize for ministry and mission. And the fancy word for that is, what is our polity? Not policy, but our polity. Polity comes from the word polis, which means city, life together. So how does our life together, uniquely as United Methodists, shape who we are, and how is it shaped by our theology and our beliefs? That's what we're going to be talking about tonight. And I'm going to have us base that understanding on some core scripture. One of the core scriptures that shapes our polity and our life together is Matthew 28:16-20. And if you'd like to, you can read along with me out loud. Now the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain to which Jesus had directed them. When they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted. And Jesus came and said to them, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything that I have commanded you. And remember, I am with you always to the end of the age. So our way of organizing our life is shaped around our mission. And for many Christian people, not just United Methodists, our mission is really articulated in Matthew 28. All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples. That's our Christian mission. Making disciples of all nations is another important part of our Christian mission. Not just disciples that we like, disciples that we prefer, disciples of all nations. Baptizing them in the name of the Father and Son and Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. Baptizing, teaching, discipling, going to the world. This is our why. This is what we do as United Methodist Christians. So as a result, the United Methodist organization is to facilitate our mission. Does that make sense? It's to help make our mission possible. Okay, so that's really important for us to be thinking about. And that's what's going to drive much of the way we organize ourselves. Another scripture that helps to drive the way we organize ourselves. Let me see if I just messed it up. Arrow back. Is Philippians chapter 2, 6 through 8. This is an incredibly important poem that helps us understand what it means to live in the image of Christ. And it's a poem that says, let the same mind be in you that was in Christ Jesus. So though he was in the form of God, did not regard equality with God as something to be exploited, but emptied himself, taking the form of a servant or slave, being born in human likeness, and being found in human form, he humbled himself and became obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. So this is the how, if you will. So the why is to go baptize, make disciples of all nations, teach everything that God has commanded us in Christ. And the how is as servants, taking on our servant selves, emptying ourselves, offering ourselves to the world. And these are formative scriptures in our mission that drive the how do we do it? And that's the next step. So we have the why, we have the how, and then our organization is how do we accomplish this? And that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. What uniquely makes us United Methodist in our organization? Oops, I am really having a hard time with moving these pictures around. Let's see. Let's try that again. Tim got me all set up and then he walked out. I just need to get it back to the beginning. Here we go. There we go. Okay. So there's some key ideas and words that are important to United Methodists in the way we organize ourselves for our mission, for our why, and our how. The first thing is this concept of conferencing. In United Methodism, the word conference is both a verb and a noun. Okay, it's something we do and it's something that we are. Okay, so what we're going to talk about tonight is the idea of conferencing. First of all, is a verb. John Wesley said that there are many ways that we experience God's grace, many ways that we live into God's grace. He calls these things means of grace, means of grace. He said one of the most important ways that we experience means of grace, experience God's grace, is through what he called conferencing, which is that coming together, okay? So that's the verb that is conference. United Methodists conference together. We conference as small entities, which we'll talk about. We conference as international entities, okay? But the conferencing is a verb. It's something we do together. The conference is also a noun. And what we're going to talk about is kind of this ripple of how the church is organized, and each one of these ripples is called a conference, okay? So when we talk about United Methodist gathering at the General Conference, at the Charge Conference, at the District Conference, what we're talking about is coming together to experience and live into God's grace together. Yes, we do business. Yes, we talk about legislative things, but it's really a means of grace. We believe that God is uniquely at work in that conferencing of Christians coming together. It's a way of gathering the church for its mission and work. Different denominations have different words for that coming together, but that's a uniquely used word in our United Methodist life. Another value of our conferencing, both the verb and the noun, is that it's always important to have clergy and lay representation. In fact, in the general conference, which we'll talk about in a minute, and in the annual conference, there is to be exactly equal lay people to clergy, because the lay voice in the United Methodist Church is just as valuable as the clergy voice. Now that's different from some other denominations. Some denominations, just the clergy come together and make decisions for the whole denomination. But that's a value of United Methodism, is that clergy and lay are both incredibly important servants of Christ, to go back to our why. The global nature of the church is important in our conferencing. We are never conferencing in isolation from one another, but always in relationship with one another. So we're always challenged, even when we have a local conference, to be thinking about the global church. And we'll talk more about the implications of that in a minute. And then each conference, as we're going to talk about in just a minute, each conference has its own frequency and its own purpose. So we'll talk about that. Depending on what the conference is, it has a unique job that it's supposed to be doing. So this is where we're going to start drawing some circles, okay? This is a really helpful way, I think, to understand the way the United Methodist Church works. The first and the center of the hub, draw my little church here. There we go. The center of the hub is the local church, okay? Every local church is what we call a church conference. Okay, because conferences are not only a noun of what we do, it's a verb, okay? So once a year, and this is going to be important when we think about timing, once a year, so one time a year, the church comes together for what we call a church or a charge conference, okay? The identity of that conference is a business meeting. We will have one this fall, or actually December 15th in the winter. We'll be having a church conference. And at that annual business meeting of the church, we come together, we sing, we worship, and we celebrate all the work that's been going on in the local church every year, okay? So we start out small, and then we're going to start rippling out with all the different conferences, okay? The next ring around the church conference is the district conference. Okay, let me show you this next picture. This will help you. Oops, that's what I said, right? Kyle, can you help me get these up quicker? Thank you. We want to get to the national, to slide number 6.
All right, if you don't mind if I start at the beginning.
No, that's fine. Go ahead and sort of jump around a little bit.
Cool.
Thanks. Number 6, next one. Okay. The district conference, in order to understand the district conference, I'm going to draw the next ring, which is the annual conference. Okay, remember each conference is both a noun and a verb. The annual conference that we are in, if you find where Colorado is here, okay, this is an old map. Why is it an old map?
Because we're solid.
It says Rocky Mountain Conference, right? And just in 2018, Rocky Mountain Conference that included Colorado, Utah, and the southern part of Wyoming merged with the Yellowstone Conference, okay? And this whole area is called the Mountain Sky Conference. Mountain Sky Conference. So that is our annual conference.
What is the name of our district?
I'm going to tell you in a second. Yeah, thanks, Catherine. Okay, so our area, so as you can tell, it's the largest conference geographically in the whole lower 48, okay? 500,000 square miles makes up the Mountain Sky Conference. 378 churches, okay? The density of those churches is primarily in Colorado because of Denver metro area. And the next highest amount of churches is up in Montana. In Utah, we only have 17 United Methodist churches in the whole state of Utah. 16 of them are in the Salt Lake Valley, and one is just right outside Salt Lake. And in Wyoming, we have just over 30 churches. Okay, so the largest density of churches in our conference is Colorado and Montana, the most being in Colorado. To Catherine's question, within Colorado, we have districts. Okay, so there are 7 districts. Or no, I'm sorry, that's not right. There are 7 districts in this whole area. In Colorado, we have 3. Okay, we have 3 districts. Our district is called the Mile High Metro District. For obvious reasons, right? We have 3 districts. The Mile High Metro District, which is really the Denver metro area. That's the district we are in. And then there's a district called Pikes and Pikes Peak, which is the northern part of Colorado. And then the eastern, a backwards L here, is the Trinity District. Okay. And we have a district, the whole state of Utah is a district. The whole state of Wyoming is a district. And then up in Montana, we have Montana East and Montana West, 2 separate districts. The work that I did last year for the annual conference was working with this whole region, with the 378 churches, not just one church, when I came here to work for the annual conference, okay? So the district conference also meets once a year, and the district conference can be held in lots of different ways, but really the district conference's job is to make sure, in the Mile High Metro, is to make sure we have a vital United Methodist witness in the entire Denver metro area. Okay, so we're looking at the small churches, the big churches. We're gathering together for an annual meeting of celebration. Yeah.
I missed the name of one of the districts in Colorado. I got Metro or Mile High Metro and Trinity. What was the other one?
Peaks/Pikes Peak. Peaks, yeah, thanks. I'll say that slower. And then we have all of Utah is a district. All of Wyoming is a district, and we have East Montana and West Montana. And over each of those districts, we have a district superintendent. And they're like a regional manager. Okay, they don't serve a church. Their job is to be responsible for, in our case, our district superintendent is Paul Kotke. He used to be the pastor at UPark before he retired. And he's been in the Denver metro area all his professional career. And he is my boss. He is an ordained pastor, but he does not have a church because he is responsible for the management of all the pastors in the Mile High Metro District. Does that make sense? Okay. And then we have the annual conference. Questions so far? Am I going too fast? Yeah.
What conference is like Western Colorado?
Western Colorado is also, the district? You mean the district? Yeah, the district is a part, some of it is a part of Utah. So Grand Junction and Western Colorado is yoked with Utah and a part of the Utah district. Thank you for that clarification. Yeah. So each of those district superintendents or district managers sit on what we call the cabinet. And the cabinet, just like in our U.S. government, the cabinet is the executive leadership that works with the bishop of our annual conference to determine where pastors are appointed, to determine the strategic mission and vision of the annual conference, okay? So part of my job last year when I worked on the conference for the bishop was I sat on that cabinet with the superintendents and with the bishop. And we were, part of our work was to decide where pastors go, where pastors stay, how pastors are getting educated. That's a big job of the cabinet. The cabinet advises the bishop in his or her work. So that's another part of the annual conference. The annual conference is led by a bishop. And anyone know our bishop's name? Yeah, Bishop Karen Alavito. Bishop Karen Alavito, okay? Every one of these conferences that you'll see the lines around, we gotta take that line out, because now we're all mountain sky. Each one of these conferences has its own bishop, okay? Some conferences share a bishop with another. So before Rocky Mountain and Yellowstone merged, Bishop Karen Alavito was the bishop of Rocky Mountain and of Yellowstone, okay? In Missouri, where I'm from, we used to have two conferences in Missouri, Missouri East and Missouri West, and the same bishop served two conferences. But typically now, our bishops in the U.S. typically serve one conference. But here's something else to see. Even though there's these conferences up here and down here are geographically much smaller than our conference, the density of Methodists is different. Where do you think the higher density of Methodists is? Texas and Southeast, right? And so, in the state of Texas, there are 5 conferences, okay? Even though geographically it's not larger than all of the Mountain Sky Conference, a bishop is appointed to a conference, and a conference is organized around the density of Methodists, okay? So there are many, many more Methodists down in Texas and down in the Southeast than there are in the West, and there's huge implications for that, which we'll talk about in a minute. Okay, huge implications for that. Okay, so that's the next rung, is the annual conference. The annual conference's function is to bring together all the Methodists, representatives of every United Methodist Church, annually, hence the word annual, come together. This past year, we did it in Billings, Montana. How many of you have had the fortunate opportunity to go to Billings? Neat town. This next year will be in Casper, Wyoming.
Gillette.
No, Gillette. Thank you, Gillette, Wyoming. Huh? Another neat town. So what's happening up here in the Mountain Sky Conference is because we have 4 states, we rotate our annual conference state by state every year, okay? When I was in Missouri conference, we only had one conference area, one bishop, so they always meet in the same place every year. And people just go to that conference, okay? Some conferences are held in hotels. Some conferences are held at United Methodist colleges or universities. It depends on the conference's decision and the resources. Now, who do we send as a church to this annual conference? Every ordained person, retired and active, is a member of the annual conference, okay? And so in Arvada United Methodist Church, we have 2 ordained active pastors, Reverend Megan and myself. So we send an equal amount of lay representatives, at least 2, and then we can also send what we call equalization delegates, who can help to balance the disproportionate balance of many more clergy than laity. And so, Camille, how many, and Steve, how many did we send last year?
15 people.
Yeah, 15.
Half were clergy.
Right. So from Arvada, retired and active, and then the equal amount. Right. Okay. So a larger church has more delegates to the annual conference than a smaller church. That's important for us to realize. Yeah.
I mean, the equalization folks are elected in the district conference.
That's right. They're elected at the district conference, and many times a church like ours can say, we have some folks we'd like to send on behalf. And so last year, or this past annual conference that we had in June, we had a banquet of all the Arvada past, present, friends, delegates, clergy, lay, and we had the
pictures on Facebook.
Pictures on Facebook.
Yeah.
Over 20 folks that came together that represented Arvada at the annual conference.
And to you.
Huh?
And to you.
And to you, yeah. So that's really the work of the annual conference, is to ask the question, how are we living in vital mission and ministry as United Methodists in this geographic region? Okay. Now, one of the things, though, that's changing in the life of the United Methodist Church is that just like, you know how counties were formed, right? people now say counties are an archaic idea because we now can be a virtual gathering community as a nation, right? We can gather virtually. We don't have to gather anymore by territories. Many counties were created by how far a horse could go before dying, before they got to the edge of a road, and that was the edge of a new county, right? I mean, that's how counties were developed rurally. Well, the same holds true with our conferences in many ways. They were geographically bound. And that's not necessarily a way that we need to order ourselves anymore. That's going to have implications for our future, which we'll talk about in a minute. Another part of the annual conference, and I think I mentioned this a couple weeks ago, is that just like you all as lay people are members of Arvada United Methodist Church, who is an ordained pastor a member of? Where? The conference. The conference. So I am a member, and Reverend Megan are members of the Mountain Sky Conference. When I first came here last year, my membership as an ordained person has been throughout my ministry in the Missouri Conference. But I transferred my membership, just like you transfer from a local church to a local church, I chose to transfer to Mountain Sky. Not because of the geography, I love the geography, but because of the values of this conference around full inclusion and diversity. That was a huge decision. It was like many of you know, when you left a beloved church and moved to Arvada and had to find a new church, that's kind of how I felt in transferring my conference membership. But I did it because of the values and the living out of the values here. Okay? So that's the annual conference. Then, God's calling, Charlotte. The next ring is what we call the jurisdictional conference, or the central conference,
Oh.
or the central conference.
Can I call how late you're gonna be
Okay.
tonight?
I mentioned in our church history that something happened when, in 1939, the Southern Church and the Northern Church came back together. Remember how we talked about that? In 1844, the Methodist Episcopal Church was broken into the North and South churches around the division around the Civil War. And it wasn't until 1939 that the church reunited into what was called the Methodist Church. A part of the way that that reunification came about was that the Southern churches only agreed to come back with the Northern churches if there was a caveat that bishops would not come from the North to go to Southern churches. Okay? And so what was created out of that agreement is what we call jurisdictions. And that's the big colored pockets here. Okay? These are larger geographic regions. That's what a jurisdiction is. So this jurisdiction up here, these are really creative names. Northeastern. South or North Central. Western, really creative. South Central and Southeast jurisdiction. Okay? And so we are in the Mile High Metro District. We are in the Mountain Sky Conference, and we are in the Western jurisdiction. Okay? And that's significant to know when we figure out what's going on with the future of the United Methodist Church. And we'll talk about why in just a second. Yeah.
I was just going to ask, and this might be something you're about to talk
Sure.
about. So if we created that because of our specific, like, United States conflict, does that apply to non-United States Methodist churches as well?
It
Do they
does.
also have?
It does. We'll show you in just a second. So look at the territory of our country that makes up the Western jurisdiction. Look at the territory. But which of the jurisdictions do you think is the smallest in density of population?
Ours.
Ours.
Yeah.
Right. So even though North Central, yeah, they're lower. But Southeast jurisdiction is our highest density population of Methodists in our country, even though geographically it's only half, less than half, of the geography of the West. Okay, then we're gonna.
Well, I'm just gonna point out, I'm sure people saw that Guam and Saipan are
Yes.
part of the Western United.
That's right. Guam and Saipan Pacific Islanders the Hawaiian Islands, and all of Alaska, okay? Alaska is a missionary conference, but they relate to what we call the Pacific Northwest Conference, which is Washington and Alaska, or what we call PNW. The former bishop that was here, Bishop Elaine Stanovsky, this is the conference that she's a bishop over, and she's a bishop over Oregon, Idaho. So she has all this and all that as her territory. California, Nevada is a huge region. California, what we call CalPAC, California Pacific, that's the conference that picks up these territories here, okay, of Pacific Islanders, and Desert Southwest. The jurisdictional, yeah, Cindy?
Where does Puerto Rico fit in then?
Puerto Rico, I'm gonna show you.
Oh,
I'm gonna show you. Good question. Other question.
So you said Alaska was a
Missionary conference.
missionary conference.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So that what that basically means is the clergy relate to the Pacific Northwest Conference. And there's very few parishes up here. But one of my best friends from Missouri, who used to be on one of my staffs, went from here to Iliff, and she got a residency to kind of a contextual education experience up in a church in Girdwood, Alaska. So she's an example of how geography is no longer an issue, right? And that's pushing the boundaries of thinking for the United Methodist Church. Do we have to be in conferences based on geography, or could we be in conferences based on affinity, not infinity, affinity? And that's a huge thing to think about, and it's a huge question for us that the church is facing. So could we be in conferences now with like-minded churches, say a progressive conference, say a traditional conference? Could we align around affinities more than geographies? Here's an example. When the General Conference legislation came out in 2019 that was leaning more traditional, that we were going to be a denomination, a mainline denomination that's more exclusive in our language and reception of LGBTQ people. We had conferences, well, I was working with the bishop, conferences and pastors from all over this part of the country say, can we come and become members of what was then the Rocky Mountain and now the Mountain Sky Conference? Because they're starting to ask the question, can we align outside of geography and now align towards affinity? And that's going to be an important part of our work in the next few weeks to talk about how do we feel about that. Okay. The task of the jurisdictional conference is singular. It's to elect bishops. And unlike all these other conferences that meet annually, the jurisdictional conference and the central conference, which I'll talk about in a moment, meets every 4 years, or a quadrennium. We like quadrilateral. We like quad stuff in United Methodist. So every 4 years, the jurisdictional conference meets. So we will have, in July of 2020, we will have a jurisdictional conference of these conferences that will come together. And their sole purpose, remember the history of why jurisdictions were created? Their sole purpose is to elect bishops. So how does that work? Well, there's delegates, lay and clergy, equal delegates from each annual conference in the Western jurisdiction that meet together. And there are people who offer themselves for Episcopal candidates to be elected as bishops. And for several months, just like our political process right now, the democratic process, what's happening is that you'll have these people who are running for bishop go and visit each of the conferences. You know, we don't have Iowa State fairs in the United Methodist Church, but we have our potluck meals, and they'll go around and do all that stuff and make their way and get to know people. And then every 4 years, depending on the retirements or deaths, unfortunately, of different bishops, that will create 2 or 3 or 4 openings. Okay, and those bishops will get elected by that jurisdictional conference. Okay, that's a body that Reverend Megan now sits on for the Mountain Sky Conference and the jurisdiction. And I used to do that back when I was in Missouri. I would be a jurisdictional delegate, and what we'll talk about in a minute, a general conference delegate. So that's what their sole job is. So the question is, okay, well, when we get a bishop, when bishops get elected, how do they know where they're going to go, right? So while a United Methodist pastor or elder will move around or itinerate in their conference. A bishop will itinerate in their jurisdiction, okay? So Bishop Karen was elected out of San Francisco. She never really hung out a whole lot in Colorado, Wyoming, Utah, and Montana, but she got appointed by a group of people who make the decision about where the bishops go. That tries to match the gifts of the bishop with the needs of the conference. She was appointed to the Mountain Sky Conference, which was the former Yellowstone and Rocky Mountain Conference. A bishop serves for 8 to 12 years typically 8 years at the most. They can serve for 12 years in an area for missional purposes, and then they will get moved, just like pastors will, to another appointment, unless they choose to retire or die. So that's the jurisdictional conference. Yeah,
Do we know at this point anybody within our jurisdiction that is going to be
retiring? Probably Bishop Elaine, Bishop Hagia down in California Pacific. Minerva Carcano will not be probably. Oh yeah, Calnep. She's in Calnep. Yeah, she's itinerated a lot. She's in Calnep. She probably will still remain. Don't know about Bishop Karen, depending on where the church goes. Don't know. And for those of you that don't know, Bishop Karen Alavito is the first openly gay bishop to be consecrated in the history of the United Methodist Church. And that's part of the reason I'm out here, is because I wanted to serve with someone that was breaking that kind of ground in the history of the church. So that's what a jurisdiction does. Okay? Yeah.
One of our bishops changed from the western jurisdiction to the southeast jurisdiction.
That's
Mary Ann Swenson.
That Mary Ann Swenson.
How did that happen?
Right. So just like a pastor is a member of an annual conference, a bishop is responsible to the whole, what we call, college and council of bishops. And so they really are technically bound to a jurisdiction, but if a different jurisdiction asks for someone to be considered in their jurisdiction, a bishop can move. But that's very rare, yeah.
It might be useful to point out that the Western jurisdiction has called pastors from other jurisdictions and consecrated them.
Yes.
First black woman bishop.
Yes.
Her name.
Yes. Yep. Leontine
Leontine Kelly, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes. So, and Minerva Carcano. Minerva she's the first Hispanic woman pastor or bishop. She came out of Texas, and she was called out to the West. The Western jurisdiction is known characteristically in the denomination for being the most progressive, inclusive jurisdiction. And so typically we have welcomed leadership from many, many ethnic and different folks of different genders, certainly sexual orientation, though not yet a transgender person, who have become bishops of the West. Okay, this is another issue that's going to come up in our thinking about the future of the church. Okay, any other questions about jurisdictions? Okay, so the big kahuna is the last ring, and that's the General Conference. General Conference. Let's go, can we go back a slide, Kyle? Thank you. The General Conference, again, meets every 4 years, okay? And what's every 4 years called? Quadrennium, okay? And it rotates, the General Conference historically has rotated, it's been US-centered, but it represents all United Methodists. And it would rotate between jurisdictions. Okay, so you get the pattern, how in the conference they rotate among their states, in the jurisdiction they rotate among their conferences, and in the General Conference, they would rotate their every 4-year meeting somewhere in a different jurisdiction. However, in 2024, but we don't know if there will be a General Conference in 2024. 2024 was slated to be the first international General Conference in the Philippines. Probably not going to happen in the way that we've known it. We'll talk about that more, but this was going to be a historic moment because by 2024, and friends, it's only 5 years from now, We anticipate that there will be a larger density of United Methodists outside the U.S. than inside the U.S. for the first time. Okay, that has implications for the future of the church. We'll talk about that. So you'll see here the colors, and these colors are where our density of United Methodists are. We have United Methodists, or not Methodists in other parts of the country and world. We have Methodists, other Methodists in South America, in Mexico. We have other Methodists in some parts of Eastern Europe, certainly some other parts of Africa, but they are not United Methodists. They aren't a part of the United Methodist history. They're part of the Methodist family, but not the United Methodist mainline denomination. Okay, remember how I talked about jurisdictional conferences? Well, these folks in the international regions are in what we call central conferences. Okay, so the central conference is very similar to a jurisdictional conference, but they are our international brothers and sisters. Okay, and they relate in all kinds of different ways as well. Here's the struggle, one among many of the struggles for the United Methodist Church. So far, because we were a U.S.-centric denomination when we were formed, our book of discipline, the Constitution, the way we organize ourselves for ministry and mission, has been very U.S.-centric. Okay? However, as our missionary work in the 19th and 20th centuries led to all of this expansion of Methodism, our Constitution and our organization has not kept up with the changes and the implications of being a global church. Okay? It's not unlike the Roman Catholic Church, right? The Roman Catholic Church is all over this map, but it's centered in Italy, in Rome, and the tension that the Catholic Church has had to figure out is, how do we stay connected as Catholics, but recognize that life is different in South America than it is in Southern Europe, right? Life is different, and contexts are different, and social expectations and mores are different in Africa than they are in Russia, okay? We are, next to Roman Catholicism, the largest international mainline Christian church that's dealing with these international implications in ways that many other denominations aren't. Okay? And what happens when we start shifting the density of Methodists away from the U.S., because we've been in decline, and these regions have been in tremendous growth historically, especially in Africa, we're seeing a change in balance around the representation at the General Conference. We'll talk about that in just a minute. The General Conference's function, remember every one of these conferences has a unique function and a unique pattern of meeting. The General Conference's core function is to align the legislative life of the church and the organizational life of the church with its mission. Okay? But do you hear where the challenge of that is? How do we organize for mission in Mozambique and in Missouri? How do we organize for mission in Western Russia and Alaska? Right? Very different needs, very different contexts. When I went to Mozambique to see the mission sites and the churches that the Missouri Conference partners with, Mozambique churches, you know, we still have churches worshiping under trees, right? They don't have organs, they don't have buildings. So our Constitution, our book of discipline talks about, you know, if you have a parsonage, you either have to provide a lawnmower or a lawn service. Do you think my brothers and sisters in Mozambique care about that? They're caring about the typhoon that's going to come in and wipe out their village, right? So there's not only technical and adaptive issues related to this, there's also social, political, and geopolitical issues. Okay? There are countries in Africa that if you are a self-avowed practicing homosexual, you'll be killed, right? And then you come to Denver, right? So how does a church figure out how to do mission and ministry in this unique and changing context? That's, I think, at the heart of what we're really wrestling with right now as a denomination. questions about that, comments?
I've never been quite clear, in a central conference, there can be multiple annual conferences, is that right?
Yes, yes, yeah. So, for instance, in Germany, I think there are 2 conferences in there. Yes, yes. And here's the other thing. We have a common book of discipline. We have a common book of discipline in the United Methodist Church, but the central conferences are not bound by it. Okay? They're not bound by it. And so the question is, okay, well, they can contextualize, and what argument about a change for the denomination is to allow us to contextualize as well. So that Southeastern United Methodists, who may be more traditionalist in their thinking around LGBTQ inclusion, let them be as contextual as a given country or conference in Africa. That option was discarded by the General Conference in 2019 for a variety of reasons. But it made sense to a lot of us. You know, let us have kind of a core discipline that connects all of us, but a contextual way of living that out. That's kind of really the way the Roman Catholic Church does it, right? But that was an option that was discarded. But it may come back to be discussed. Yeah.
So the population in the Central Conference, which is Africa and Europe and all that, they're not United Methodists, they're Methodists, but they still attend our General Conference? Is that right?
If they are in a Central Conference, they are United Methodists.
Oh, okay.
And they have a place at the General Conference table, yes. But there are Methodists in China and Korea, but they are not United Methodists, okay?
So they would not attend.
They would not attend typically. We have some concordant delegates, which I'll talk about in a minute. But typically, the way you access the General Conference as a delegate is to be elected by your conference. So in the Mountain Sky Conference, we have 4 delegates, 4 clergy, 4 lay delegates that represent the Mountain Sky Conference to the General Conference. And your ticket, if you will, to have your conference represented at the General Conference is to be an annual conference, either in the U.S. or in the Central Conferences, and you're elected. Yeah.
Well, there are Methodists in the United States that are not United.
That's right. That's right. That's a good point. That's right. And they may attend what we talked about last week, I think, or the week before, the World Methodist Council. Those are groups like Nazarenes, Church of God Holiness, some of those other traditions that have Wesleyan roots, but they're part of the larger Methodist family, but they're not a voting delegate of the United Methodist General Conference.
What about something like primitive Methodists?
Primitive Methodists, no, they're not United Methodists.
Oh, no,
But they would be a part. They'd be a part of that Methodist council. That's right. Good question. Free Methodists, or another one. Kyle, will you go to the next slide?
No,
And then the next one. And the next one. There you go. This is fascinating. So our next general conference is in Minneapolis, Minnesota. If you're looking for something for fun to do, May 5th through 15th. People like Ben and Maggie and I, we love this stuff, man. And thanks to Ben, he helped me get these stats pulled together very quickly today. So thank you, Ben, for helping me with that. But here are the delegates, the numbers of delegates going based on the regions. Okay, so first of all, there's going to be 862 delegates. There's going to be half clergy exactly, half laity exactly. Okay, they will get elected out at their annual conferences, out of each annual conference. But look at this. Look at the Western jurisdiction. We have 26 votes in that 862. Look at the Southeastern jurisdiction, 182. Not because we're basing our delegations on geography, we're basing our delegations on Methodist density, right? Look at the other central conferences. Congo Central Conference, 152 delegates. Okay? Philippines, 52 delegates. West Africa Central Conference, 86 delegates. Okay, so here's where the rubber meets the road at General Conference. When decisions are being made about the future of the denomination, and representative voices are literally punching into a voting pad about these decisions about the future of the denomination, We have 26 delegates from that entire western third of our country. Okay, so if the western jurisdiction aligns more progressive, that does not mean every Methodist in the western jurisdiction is progressive. And that's not a bad thing. I think we're a healthier church because we have people on an entire spectrum. I want us to be a church that keeps people conservative, progressive, and everybody in between in the same churches together. But what's getting forced is a conservative, kind of traditionalist viewpoint that's pushing the church in that direction. And the energy that's coming from that is especially the Philippines, the African Central Conferences, South Central and Southeastern jurisdiction. But I should say, because I'm being recorded right now, and I want to make sure I also say, that does not mean that every Christian, United Methodist in those places are all conservative either. Okay? But as we keep looking at the numbers, and Ben Rowe, y'all need to know, he's doing this for the whole church. He's tracking all these studies and all these maps. So if you really want to get into the thick of this, go to Ben, because he's doing this for the whole church, not just for us, or not just for Mount Scott. What we keep on realizing is even as the United States Methodists are leaning every quadrennium more and more progressive, we are still a minority in the larger 862 votes between progressive and conservative. Okay? In fact, I could argue that at least for the past 30 years, if we didn't have our Central Conference vote, we would have tipped into a experience of being fully inclusive and diverse with the LGBTQ community. But please hear me saying, that would be to kind of cut off an arm of the family, right? And this is a part of our family. And so how do we live in relationship and in community and a common mission of making disciples of all nations, How do we do that with our differences? That's kind of our core space that we're in right now. What questions do you have? Comments?
I think since we're being recorded, I should say that what I'm doing is a website that tries to collect as much as I can about what's going on with the revolt in the United Methodist Church, particularly in Western Europe and the United States, against the traditionalist plan. The General Commission on Finance and Administration is where all of this data comes from. So
Thank you. Thanks, Ben. He's not generating it. Yeah. But, and Ben, what's the website if people want to go?
The simplest is to go to United Methodist, UMARC.org, United Methodist Association of Retired Clergy.org, and then look for post-general conference.
Yeah, and it'll give you all kinds of things.
It's under resources. The other is jbenjaminrowe.com.
Thank you, Ben. Yeah.
Another international church is the Mormon Church. How have they, I mean, I know there have been many conflicts as they got into countries that couldn't follow the rules. How have they managed?
Mm-hmm.
Are they in the same situation?
To some extent they are, Fran. It was really interesting. Last year when I was on the cabinet with the bishop and the cabinet, I mean, this is crazy. We got invited to Salt Lake City to meet with the North American leaders of the Mormon Church. They gave us a tour, they gave us an organ concert. It was incredible. And y'all need to know what this meant to welcome the first lesbian, openly gay bishop of the United Methodist Church for this. And it was terribly intentional on their part to say, we are figuring this out too. It was an amazing conversation. It blew all of us away. They took us into some of the inner sanctums of places that they don't take the general public into. It was a relationship building conversation. And just recently, in fact, I was supposed to have a meeting with her today, but we had to postpone it. There's a representative of the Mormon community here in Arvada who's worshiped with us a couple times at the 8 o'clock service, and her job is to build ecumenical relationships. What does ecumenical mean again? Different groups of Christians, right? And she's building relationships with the different churches of Arvada to say, how can we partner together? So I think that there's a real space of they're trying to figure out too, how do we be inclusive while maintaining our identity and our heritage and our cult ministry. And so we're not the only fish in this sea. Presbyterians have been struggling with this. Lutherans have been struggling with this. Some Baptists have been struggling with this. This is a conversation that many churches are having. And the value right now for United Methodists in the hard conversation we're having is that there are other mainline churches who have already done this work. PCUSA, Presbyterian Church of America, or not, no, PCUSA, not Presbyterian Church of America. That's the conservative church. The Lutheran Church, ELCA, Evangelical Lutheran Church of America, they have done this work. So we also have some patterns and some conversations and some learnings to learn from. Other questions?
So one of the challenges of rewriting the lines in terms of jurisdictions and taking the geography away from it would be delegates.
That's right.
And reassigning how that delegate would even look across the entire.
That's right. That's right, Robin. In fact, we can go back to the national slide, Kyle. In order to take these boundaries down, to take down annual conference geographic boundaries, that gets done by the jurisdiction. To take down geographic lines of the jurisdictions is inaction of the general conference. But one of the plans that has been offered, and it's gaining more traction right now, is to have kind of a progressive jurisdiction, a traditionalist jurisdiction, and kind of an in-the-middle jurisdiction. And each conference has to figure out which jurisdiction they're going to align with. But think of how hard that is. You know, how are we going to get all the Methodists in Wyoming, Montana, Utah, and Colorado to agree on that decision? How could we get Arvada United Methodist Church ready to have kind of a union decision about its thinking? Now, we probably will be able to do that because of the progressive identity of this church. But there are still people in this congregation who don't align that with progressive theology, but they love this community, they love this church, they found a home here. So we've got some work ahead of us that we're going to have to figure out as a local church, as a district, as a conference, as a jurisdiction, and as a general church. Isn't that crazy? Let me just close real quickly. I know I'm running out of time, but can we go to the bread picture? Because this is an important picture that some people want to know about too. Every United Methodist Church, how do we fund this? How do we make this system happen? It's through what we call our apportionments. Or in Mountain Sky Conference, the language we use is missional giving. Every United Methodist Church, based on its membership size, its average worship attendance size, its budget, its debt, is assessed, if you will, an apportionment, an amount of money, a portion of our budget that goes to help fund this system. This is a really helpful graphic that lets us know that 87 cents of every dollar that you put in the plate towards apportionments, and about 10% of our operating budget goes towards apportionments. 87 cents stays in the local church. Okay. Well, it's 87 now. Yeah. I think it's up a little higher than 85. This is a few years old. Around 85 to 87. What that means is our Sunday school curriculum, our trademark, denominational identity, the education of our pastors, that comes back to benefit the local church. And then a portion of that also goes to helping with benevolent giving, to general apportionments, which include costs like how do the bishops get paid? How do the district superintendents get paid, right? How does our publishing house get paid that generates our curriculum? How does our pension program for our pastors get paid? And then 7 cents goes to jurisdictions, annual conferences, and districts. So that's how you know how those bodies are being funded. But when we start talking about the finances of our church this fall, you'll hear a reference to missional giving or apportionments, and that's what we're talking about. Okay?
What was the 6 cents?
The 6 cents is benevolent giving, second mile giving. So that's kind of the missional extension of the church, beyond our local church. So missionaries that are funded abroad. We as a local church help fund some missionaries. Sue already had the lead fund. We fund locally, our church helps fund some missionaries, but we also fund missionaries that are helping do our mission work in Africa through that apportionment giving as well.
is part of that board,
No,
the administration.
the UMCOR administration. UMCOR is the United Methodist Committee on Relief. It's our Red Cross. And every time you write a check to UMCOR for a natural disaster or situation, 100% of that goes towards ameliorating that disaster. Because the overhead of UMCOR, not through apportionments, it's through our one great hour sharing in the fall. It's a special offering that we will take, and that helps fund UMCOR. UMCOR is one of the best things, in my opinion, that the United Methodist Church does. And so, if you're ever moved to respond to a natural disaster or a human-made disaster, I always give through UMCOR, because when you give to other organizations, you have to go into the red tape and realize that sometimes only 40% of your gift is going into direct relief, because the rest is going into overhead. But UMCOR is 100% because of our one great hour sharing offering, which is very cool. I know I've gone over, but hopefully this has given you all just a quick primer on our organizational structure, because next week we'll be moving into conversations around, okay, what's next and how do I feel about that? As I promised, we'll be sending you this week by email. You'll get kind of a little e-brochure about courageous conversations and kind of the method of how we do that. It's not a content delivery kind of thing like I've been doing the past 3 weeks. It's more of a conversation around tables. So keep on taking the plunge and being with us and inviting others who might like to be a part of our time together. All righty? Thanks for coming, guys. Good work tonight.